Hello, this is David Mense, and this is my review of the first two chapters of Linda Darling-Hammond's book, The Flat World and Education. As I read the first two chapters of the text, I quickly realized that although I believe her examples and understand her points about the lack of equity in the U.S. public schools, I have a hard time directly relating to them. I've never lived nor worked in an environment that is described by the author. Given that background, I tried to approach this text searching for a theme that would resonate with me. The underlying theme, in my opinion, that permeates the Darling-Hammond text is the need for connectedness that is often lacking in our public school system, especially the connectedness between students and their teachers. An example given by the author of the lack of connectedness often experienced by students from low-income, high-minority schools is the huge teacher turnover in poor urban districts and how it is detrimental to student achievement. Connections either don't have time to be made or fall apart too quickly. Consequently, very little rigorous instruction is occurring and students do not feel valued. In contrast to the high teacher turnover schools, reference is made to higher performing schools in Europe, where teachers often stay with the same children and advance with them for several years. By having the same students for multiple years, it gives teachers the opportunity to form a connection with students that can provide the relationship piece needed for high achievement in school. I can actually speak about the benefits of this practice from experience. When my oldest son was in first grade, he had a wonderful teacher. She was a very caring woman who pushed the students to give their absolute best in everything they did. We learned at the end of first grade that this teacher would move up with the same students into second grade. Both the teacher and students were very excited, and it was obvious the students felt a connection to the teacher. My son, as well as a majority of the students in that class, academically grew tremendously during first and second grade. He would not show the same growth again until much later in his academic career. It was obvious that the relationship between the students and the teacher factored into the academic success of those students. The importance of relationships and academic success cannot be overstated. On page 30, Darling-Hammond states, "Furthermore, students' willingness to commit to school and their future is interwoven with their perceptions about whether the society, their schools, and their teachers believe they are worthy investments, perceptions that enable them to invest in themselves." To the relationship between student and the teacher, in a recent publication, Elise Scott writes, "The person they, meaning the students, will be connecting with is more important to them than the content delivered, paperwork completed, or diagnostic test administered." Similar point, Melanie Asmar states that if you, meaning teachers, don't have their, students, hearts, you'll never have their heads. The relationship piece is very important. Relationships may be more challenging, but perhaps even more important as the diversity within our schools increases. On page 5, the author comments on how countries like Finland, South Korea, and Singapore have been able to create, quote, high and equitable achievement despite high levels of poverty and growing ethnic and linguistic diversity among their citizens, end quote. I witnessed a similar phenomenon at Beam Primary School in Barking, England. That's where this picture is from. Due to the influx of immigrants in the last 10 years, Barking has become a very diverse borough. Available employment has not kept pace with the influx of people, and the jobs that are available are low paying. Beam Primary would qualify as a low-income, high-diversity school. The diversity of students can be problematic. For example, in one first-grade class, there were 13 different languages spoken by the students. Having a student population originating from an area of such high diversity has been a challenge for the teachers. By embracing this diversity, setting high expectations for all students, and working to establish connections between teachers, students, and parents, the faculty were able to take this school, formerly ranked in the lowest 1% achievement in all of the London public schools, and turn it around to a top 10 school. This change occurred in only 3 years. The effect of developing a connection between the community and the school cannot be overstated. While working in Carteret County, North Carolina, I remember how the smaller K-8 schools of the Down East communities typically performed higher than schools in the more urban centers of the county. In these community schools, the teachers, staff, and students were neighbors and often relatives. Granted, these schools weren't very diverse, but there was a sense of pride in the school and learning that was occurring. The connection between teachers, students, school personnel, and the community established a series of high-performing schools. In the Down East schools, as well as Beam Primary in London, falls in line with what Darling-Hammond calls successful new models for schools. She quotes on page 65, "Research suggests that successful new models of schooling require strong teaching faculties who work in organizational structures that create more coherence and communal orientation, in which staff see themselves as part of a family and work together to create a caring environment." Like I said, I'd like to suggest some potential solutions to current equity problems in our public schools. Number one, I think we should change how curriculum is covered in school. In a similar fashion to high-achieving nations, as determined by scores on international assessments, the number of topics per subject per grade level needs to be reduced. This reduction would permit greater depth in teaching and multiple ways to understand how problems are solved. Number two, which follows in relation to number one, would be a reduction in high-stakes testing. However, the problem is that testing companies have grown quite wealthy with the advent of standardized tests, and they are not likely to give up the monetary advantage. Number three, I would promote programs that provide scholarships for teachers in return for service in educationally depressed schools for 4 years of return. Teachers would complete a rigorous set of standards to be credentialed to teach in high minority, low-income schools, and teachers that broke the contract would have to pay back the cost of their education. This would help reduce the parade of teachers that many students in poorer schools face. In addition, teachers would be encouraged to complete the National Board Certification process. Research cited by Darling-Hammond found that rigorous teacher training, several years of experience, and National Board Certification had a large impact on student achievement. And finally, placing educational leaders in positions to promote a cooperative atmosphere among the faculty where there is an emphasis on building instructional communities would also add to helping provide equity in schools. List of references used in this presentation. Thank you.